Hello, disruptors, and welcome to another empowering episode of Mindset Mastery Moments. Today, we're diving into a chilling and eye-opening story that exposes the dark side of leadership and the critical importance of transparency, ethical governance. You see, we are going to be diving into a topic we're calling exposing the dark side of leadership. And we've got a guest that is going to bring us lessons from awesome, impactful book that he wrote that's called Roman Color Crime.
In a world where trust and faith are shattered, one book reveals the chilling secrets hidden behind the Roman collar. Roman Color Crime Violated: The Transgressions of a Small-Town Priest.
You see, many times as individuals, we tend to trust our leaders and our government and anyone that we follow to do the right thing. But our guest today encourages us in his book. He brought to light the harrowing transgressions of a small town priest in his jaw-dropping book that is called that Roman Color Crime. And let me tell you something. I have met our guests, of course, before this, and we've had some conversation around this topic. And I know for some of you are like, well, what does leadership have to do with Roman Color Crime, Dr. Whyte? Well, that's exactly what we want to do, is to show you the parallel importance of quality leadership through the story that Charles wrote about, which does, as he would share with us, does capture some real life events with a lot of changes in the character. You see, our guest today is none other than Mr. Charles Utter. Mr. Charles Utter, I would invite you to come on up to the Mindset Mastery Moments stage. We can't wait to have you and have you delve into this topic with us today on the dark side of leadership.
Well, hello, Alisa. How are you today? Good to be here.
I'm so glad we finally made it to recording your episode. It's been a long time in the waiting, and I know that our guests are going to benefit a lot. But before we get into you, let me just tell the audience a little bit about you and your background. Ladies and gentlemen, Mindset Mastery community, Charles Utter has an incredible story to share. He became a victim of a corrupted authority when he and his own girlfriend was victimized by their supposedly devout leader, a small-town Catholic priest who turned out to be a con artist, fraudulent investor, and a serial sex abuser. In this book, Charles exposed the dirty secrets of one of the most powerful institutions on the planet, and he makes a compelling case for why we need to radically change our leadership landscape and consider that there is a dark side to leadership and how we truly should protect ourselves and the people that we are responsible for. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, let's give it up for Charles. Sit back and let's delve into this conversation. Charles, welcome again. And thank you so much for being here.
Very, very happy to be here.
So let's delve right in. Charles, in your own words, tell us who you are and how did you get to become the author that you are today?
Well, I don't have, I don't think, the most exciting story to tell when it comes to my life. I think one of the keys is that I graduated from college and became a teacher and a coach. And one of my motivating things, I guess to say, is that I was determined to never treat kids like I'd been treated.
Right.
And that had two components. One, I had a difficult father, but this priest was running the school that I went to for the entire time that I went there, from elementary school through high school. And he just piled on as far as things that I was struggling with in life. And so, yeah, it created a determination to have an impact on high school kids, kids in general, and making sure that they didn't have to deal with an authority figure that was going to be treating them like he had been treated. And that made me a very positive oriented individual who did everything to build them up, while at the same time, pointing out, deficiencies when they were there,
Right.
but doing it in a way that was positive rather than disruptive. And
Mm.
so that was my start. And I probably made a mistake of not staying in the teaching and coaching business because I was pretty good at it.
Ah.
I was coach of the year in cross country in state of North Dakota at age 26.
Wow.
So I was, doing well. I had a great basketball team as well. But I got married. My wife is an artist. She wasn't making any money. She's a great artist, though, by the way. She's one of the best. And it just amazes me that her work doesn't sell, but she's a watercolor artist. And so that makes it even more difficult. But anyway, we just weren't making enough money doing what I was doing. And I actually was in summer school at North Dakota State University. And one of my teachers that summer was the new basketball coach at North Dakota State. And so I asked him, how much he was making. And he said $14,000. Well, a year. Now that's a pittance. And I was making 10. And I'm thinking, what is the chance that I'm ever going to get to the level of, a Division II head coach? How much work is that going to take with very little reward? And that really discouraged me. And I applied for a job that I thought was a real advancement that same summer, and I never got it. And that was enough to get me to move on. And I went into the life insurance business. I did pretty well over the years. I still engage in that practice to some degree. But in the course of being in business, we moved to a new town in Colorado. I was very active in the community.
Right.
And it ended up with me being the creator of the Longmont, Colorado Community Foundation, which now has $20 million in it and gives out over $1.5 million a year to needy people in the community. So that was kind of the highlight. But I was on parish councils, school boards, community boards, just about anything that you can think of.
Right.
And so that's where my greatest impact was community-wise. Then I have 7 siblings that are very close.
Right.
And we would get together every other summer at some resort area in the upper Midwest, and we constantly talked about we constantly spoke about this priest. He was the topic of conversation continuously every time we got together, partly because my oldest sister was one of the community members that eventually worked to remove this priest from the community. So she had a lot of inside information, none of which she was specific to us about because she had promised to be confidential about things. But still, we had all experienced the priest in much the same way. And he had made an attempt to on one of my sisters who was smart enough to reject him out of hand. But anyway, so somebody said, somebody ought to write a book. And after a while, I decided it was going to be me. And so I did a lot of research. I knew that most of the people that I needed to talk with, and a lot of his opponents, but a lot of his supporters as well. Disappointed a lot of people in the community that had been good friends of mine because they didn't think that book should ever be published. But I felt like it was necessary so that, number one, people who were involved in the Catholic Church would be supported in their felt need to clean up the church.
Right.
So many priests have been accused of abuse and things like that. And I frankly think my story is more comprehensive and outlines a greater amount of abuse in more areas than almost anybody else, at least anybody that I've read about. So I think in that sense, it will be valuable for people in the, especially Catholic community, to read it and support the change that's needed to, kind of limit the problem. And, you mentioned, I think, either in our discussion before we went on or as you came on, that I had a goal to help really change the church. And I had mentioned that there's really only one change that will be effective in changing the church, and that is the change in the hierarchical nature of the Catholic Church. I believe that hierarchy is an anachronism. It doesn't work anymore, if it ever did, and that people need to be empowered instead of the hierarchy. So I can that's kind of my story.
I love that you're on that quest with where you think it's crucial that you shed the light on dark corners and provide a space of advocacy for a healthier, more transparent leadership environment. And I believe that's across the board, not just in the Roman Catholic Church. I mean, of course, I love that you're specific about where you want to see it, but for me personally, that's just my own personal quest. And even in this era, I'm so I just keep growing. So I am the change I want to see in the world first. And then the people who I impact and I get to coach or train or even speak to, and even with this podcast, any platform that's exemplified in character, word, and deed. So I really can co-sign to that. So Charles, can you share your personal experience with the small town priest and the impact it had on you? And specifically in your book, you talk a little bit about the impact it had on you and your girlfriend. What was that like?
Well, that's this might not sound so bad to some people, but to me, because of the mindset that I brought to life because of my relationship with my father, it had a lot of impact. So I was a pretty good basketball player in high school, and I was the only sophomore to make the varsity, and I played a lot on the team as a varsity player. And one of the games that I was in as a sophomore, I played a lot because I was shooting very well. And coaches being coaches, they love the shooter, especially when he's making most of the ones that he attempted. He put me in the game for an extended period of time as a sophomore. I was not a starter, but that really irritated this priest. And this priest used to sit in the stands every game all by himself with a notebook, taking notes about what was going on in the game. And I don't know his ultimate objective, but I think it was to be able to critique the coach. He was a pretty on-hand kind of a guy. Did a lot of interfering with the coaching and the teaching that was going on in the school and such. So after the game was over, the priest went into the coach's office and he started haranguing him about playing a sophomore, and I can't think of the word that I want to use, but making him out to be, somebody special when he was just a sophomore. You should never do that to the young people, right? You never want to uplift them too much because they might get a big head. I don't know what the thinking what the thinking was, but anyway, he tore into the coach, and all the players heard it because the coaching office was right next to our locker room. And then the next day, he put up a letter or a message on the school message board that was right where all the kids walked as they were changing classes, etc., and really knocked me personally and the coach, and kind of repeated pretty much what he had said during his tirade with the coach after the game. And so after that, I played very little, and which was totally different than what had existed leading up to that thing. So that was a big deal. But probably the biggest thing that happened in my life was he forbid what he called going steady with a girl. And that going steady meant that if you took out a girl 3 times in a row, you were going steady. And that was prohibited.
Oh, wow.
And I was kind of a rebel, and, I just was hard to convince that there was anything wrong with that, because my relationship with my girlfriend was extremely platonic, and it stayed that way on a permanent basis until we broke up. And that had probably more to do with her values than mine, but it was something that I lived with and really loved her for. But we were kicked out of school 3 times. Grade, 10th grade, and 12th grade. And we would have been kicked out in 11th grade, but he had a bad car accident and wasn't in school for the entire year.
Oh, wow.
So we got to stay in school our entire junior year of school.
Wow.
But anyway, that was the kind of thing that we were putting up with. And then here's my suspicion, and I hope she doesn't hear this, be honest with you, because it's only a suspicion. But when I was disciplined, I was taken into his office in the school and read the riot act. When she was disciplined, she was called into his office in his home. And so they were there alone. And about on our freshman year of college, after being extremely close for 4 years, when I went to see her one time, she wouldn't talk to me. And I had traveled several hundred miles to go see her. I was in college and she was at a different school. And I would quiz her as to what was wrong. And then finally she said, well, we're breaking up. No explanation, no amplification, no nothing, just we're breaking up. And that was it. And I interpreted that as her not wanting to tell me what had happened to her with the priest. Because she, as I said, we were committed to a pure relationship and a platonic relationship, and I think he raped her. And to compound that, later on, she enticed one of my best friends, both of our best friends from high school, into having sex with her. That was after about 2 years of college. So here's a platonic relationship that went 5 years almost, and now all of a sudden she's enticing a best friend to have sex. What does that mean? I don't know. But that happened, and so where did it come from?
Right.
And then she left the Catholic Church and went into a very fundamentalist Christian. I think it's a Christian Scientist. I can't think. I'm not sure of that, but it's one where they're very rigid, and she was kind of an evangelical. She was after her family, alienated her family, trying to convert every one of them. And she had, I think, 7 brothers and sisters too.
Wow.
Anyway, we had big families back in those days.
Right.
But anyway, so that was, the way I was impacted, and one of the things that motivated the writing of the book.
Okay, that sounds, wow, that's interesting. What are some of the most shocking revelations you uncovered during the investigation that you did for the book?
Well, That's a tough one. You know, a lot of what I uncovered really had been uncovered in rumors when we were kids, because people observed this priest doing things, and we talked about him. Our parents forbid us from gossiping about the priest, but we did it, you know, with each other.
Right.
So I knew a lot of the stuff that had been going on, but you know, and then my sister was so critically involved as well. So she, I can't really be specific about any one thing that I learned from her, but it was a lot of stuff.
Right.
One of the really key factors in his success in perpetrating so much of his sexual activity with women and young girls, actually, was that he had taken money out of the offertory and invested it extremely well. He actually initially invested in a oil field investment in Alaska under the auspices of John Kennedy, or Joseph Kennedy, John Kennedy's father.
Oh, wow.
And he made a lot of money in that investment.
Wow.
And when he got out of that, he went into the real estate business. I'm sorry. The second thing that he did is he invested his money with G.D. Searle and Company, the creator of the birth control pill.
Oh, wow.
So here's a Catholic priest investing in the company that creates the birth control pill. And you know, you could guess, since we were fairly rigid Catholics, we went to confession frequently. And so sexual sins were fairly, you know, they had to be very common. And so the women that were having what they thought was illicit sex or actually doing birth control, which was a sin in the Catholic Church at the time. Anything other than natural birth control was wrong and was confessed, I'm sure. So he knew, you know, how big this was. And so his investment in G.D. Searle and Company tripled his money in just 3 years.
Wow.
Then he had a associate friend who he had gone to the priesthood with, and who ended up being the financial manager of the Archdiocese of Los Angeles. And they knew Kennedy very well because Kennedy had been a personal friend of Pope Pius XII. And so he knew a lot of the bishops, including the bishop at the Archdiocese of Los Angeles. And he was giving the priest there, the one that was running the finances for the diocese, was giving the trades that they had learned about, real estate trades, to Kennedy, who was then ended up in the hands of the priest as well. So through his friend in the Archdiocese of Los Angeles, he was able to build a huge real estate dynasty, and he ended up with 12 hotels in his estate and about $2.5 million in securities. So then, of course, he used that money to romance those who were ended up being his victims. He was noted for being gone for long periods of time, and typically we learned that a lot of those times he was with one of his girls. And I'm maybe getting ahead of myself here, but one of my high school basketball coaches had 7 kids and a wife who was a nurse. And I'd mentioned that he was out of school for a whole year at one time after a car accident. But the nurse that took care of him was the wife of this coach, and they immediately began a relationship that actually lasted for 15 years. And we hear stories about him driving significant distances to see her after, of course, she had left the community, and spending significant amounts of money taking her out and what have you. And the police one time stopped him for speeding, He was a notorious speeder, by the way. We loved going to basketball games with him because he always went so fast. But he was picked up for speeding, and they checked his car for some reason, had him open his trunk, and there were grocery bags of cash in his trunk.
Oh, wow.
That was one occasion, but it happened more than once. On another one of his victims was a recent graduate of the school that he ran that decided to become a nun. And he would take a personal interest in all of the girls that wanted to be nuns, and he took her on a trip, a rewards trip, to one of his hotels in Disneyland. And that's where he attempted to have sex with her. I think she resisted it, but anyway, on the way there, he drove. He didn't like to fly, and that was in the early days of flights as well. Anyway, so they drove from this little town in North Dakota all the way out to California to his hotels, and on the way they stopped to eat, and she witnessed him opening his trunk and taking the cash out that was needed from these grocery bags of cash to pay for their meals. So that was one of the revelations, his extreme wealth. When he died, and you can look this up if you had his first real name, but it's online. His estate was extremely large, and there was some litigation that took 10 years based on a document that was poorly drafted, and the trustees went to court, and during that 10 years, the IRS was constantly interfering in the motel business, and so their business went to heck, and their values in their sale values went way down. So 25 million became 18 million, and that was about the estate tax that was assessed. So he had an $18 million estate tax liability, and they couldn't sell the real estate for what they needed to pay the tax. And so the estate is still open. And so you can see all of the details about his estate by going online and just Googling this priest's estate. You could probably come up with a couple of other ways of finding it as well. But so that was the result of his accumulation and getting advice that was extremely poor, that caused him to lose his entire estate. So that was one of the things was the money situation. But one of the things that he did with his money, which was really impactful in the community, was that he went out and hired rock star athletic coaches. And so I had the good fortune of being coached by some of the best coaches high school coaches in the country. He would go out and pay inordinate amounts of money to get these coaches to come to a small town. My high school football coach, he was actually there when I was a ninth grader, was named Ron Earhart. Ron Earhart started his first head coaching job in a school of 250 kids in a town of less than 1,000 people, and he eventually became the head football coach of the New England Patriots. That's the quality of the coaches. My two high school basketball coaches, one was his cousin, who had a great reputation in Montana as a basketball player, and early on as a coach, paid him a bunch of money to come to our school, and then started sleeping with his wife. And that coach got so upset that, well, he actually caught them one time, and he had a gun in his garage. He went out to get the gun. The priest, fled to his home. And when the wife saw that her husband had gotten a gun, she called the cops, and it's a small town. So the coach got to the priest's house at about the same time as the cop did, but he was going to kill him.
Mm.
The cop was, of course, able to talk him out of it, and so he lived on. But he left, and they got divorced. And unfortunately, it was a very unfortunate thing. He became a president of a junior college in Montana. He was an outstanding guy. But the next coach had the best record in both football and basketball, high school, in the history of the state of Montana. And I won't go into detail on how he found this person and how he attracted it, other than he gave him big money to bring him into the school. And that's the coach whose wife ended up having this relationship with him. And that was a tragedy in itself. And another book could be written about the impact that had on his family.
Right.
So he had money and he had power, and he used his image as a priest to create relationships in the community. He broke up at least 5 marriages in the community. A lot of those people wouldn't talk when I did my research. The one girl that went to become a nun and who was abused by him talked to me for a while, but then she got so upset about things that she couldn't talk anymore. So you can begin to understand the impact that it had on these people.
Right.
It's just very interesting. So, not thinking.
A lot of corruption. That's a lot of corruption. So
you get the essence of what's surrounding all of the issues.
Yeah. So when we talk about, taking it on the broader spectrum in a more generalistic view, if you can share with us what you think the broader implication of corruption within a religious institution, how does that really affect the parishioners and people in general? When we think broadly, because obviously I'm pretty sure that while this case may come across as an isolated incident, there's still a general undertone of a level of corruption that does transpire within religious institutions. So what do you think the implications of this sort of corruption is on
Well, I think, people are leaving the church in droves. I just saw a statistic recently that in their 60s, 75% of people who call themselves Catholics went to church every Sunday. That number is down to 40%.
Wow.
And more connected to my book, the kids that went to that high school, almost all fell away from the church.
Oh, wow.
I mean, it was rampant. So none of the people that I was acquainted with, not none of them, there's some that stayed, but they left. And so that's the impact of this kind of thing is people just lose confidence in the church, and they say to themselves, if this is what I believed and it's proven not to be true, what else is not true? And they just walk away from God entirely. They become totally skeptical about organized religion.
Right,
and
definitely.
You probably understand that once you do that, it's very difficult to become personally engaged with your God. I was fortunate to found a prayer practice. Well, let me just back up a little bit. Well, I taught 5 years in a Catholic school, and during that entire time, I was an atheist, and it was because I had gone through all of this with this priest. And so down the road, I started figuring it had to be a lot more to life than what I was experiencing. And I started looking again, and I came across something called centering prayer, which is a spiritual practice that was created by a priest named Thomas Keating, and that brought me back to God. And I am so thankful for that, because it's transformed my life. In addition to bringing me back to God, it's made me a much better person. And so I was lucky, but not everybody is lucky like that. Not everybody is.
I agree.
I guess, as eager to get back to something in the spiritual sense. So
I agree. So when you think about all this, and I feel like that's what I love our topic, and what do you think are the factors that allow corruption to thrive within trusted institutions, not just in a religious institution, but in general? What do you think are those key factors that allow corruption to thrive in trusted into institutions across the board?
well, I think as far as the churches are concerned, they prize their image more than anything. And whenever something like I wrote about gets out in the news, it tends to destroy their image. So when somebody comes to a pastor with a problem with another priest, for example, or goes to a bishop about a priest,
right,
the first thing they think about is, oh my God, this is awful. We can't let this get out in public.
You can't let it
because it'll hurt the church.
Okay, gotcha.
And that's really the essence of it. The Catholic Church is reportedly doing a better job of interviewing candidates for the priesthood so that they can avoid bringing those types of people aboard. But I think the essence of the problem was not only the fact that the church was hiding the problem, but it was that they were recruiting individuals who saw that as a place that would give them access, the kids, so that they could, and that would then protect them from what they would be perpetrating on those kids.
It's a safe harbor instead of, there is no proper chain of accountability, and because of the thoughtful need of how does this affect us if it came out, so those chains of accountability has not been created, and so it becomes more or less, without saying, a safe harbor for what I would say criminal minds. Because again, you can have a good solid interviewing process. And I say to people, like when we think of like a sexual offender registry, sexual predator registry, these things are helpful, but a person is not on that registry until they are caught and gone through a trial and being proven to be guilty of said crimes. So in the meantime, there are people who have not been caught yet, still getting away with it. But if we had a system inside that says, if this happened, you are safe enough to say, this happened to me and I got hurt by this person, whether it was a financial crime or a sexual crime or whatever that looks like. If let's just, for example, say the religious institutions were able to say there's an accountability process and we have zero tolerance. So yes, and then the families inside these institutions were like, you're always safe to let me know what happened. I will listen to you. I will help you. Then it will be easier. It's easier than saying that will set a system. Then, okay, here comes Charles's girlfriend. You're a liar. There's no way Father Alisa would do such and such. There's no way, and so that system, the anti-venom is going to be tackling it head on. It's not going to be, if you're not creating a space for people to come forward, then you're creating a space to cover it up. And it's really that simple. So when I think of trusted institutions and I'm listening to what you're saying, I'm like, what are the tiers of accountability? And what is the process of weeding it out? Like you said, to start from interviewing, that's good. But I don't know you're a criminal until you create a criminal act that I found out about. So then someone might be like, oh, Father Alisa is well recommended from all these other parishes she's been to. She's got a great track record, but now something's happened with her, even mentally. And now she's perpetrating acts on young people or inside this institution. that is not less than anything she's been before, but now it is. So if you have an accountability space, then the ones who are set up to think and be that way won't necessarily get to come in and cause as much damage as this particular priest did. You know what I'm saying? So I feel like, when it comes to corruption, you have to have an anti-corruption plan. What are your thoughts?
Well, I agree. And quite frankly, I'm not sure where the church is on that point. But I know that they've done a better job of preventive recruitment, I guess, because the reported incidences are going down significantly. I think, though, that modern communication has more to do with that than anything else. In the old days, you could hide things pretty easily because the average person could only spread the word through newspapers and letters.
Yeah, and face-to-face.
Face-to-face.
Yeah.
And nowadays, information explodes around the world before you can count to 10.
Right.
So,
I agree.
Yeah.
So how did the community react when all the revelations came to light? Because that would be that era of accountability, right? If there,
I can tell you what happened to my sister. She was married to a very successful farmer, and they had all kinds of friends. She was very active in the parish, and she had graduated from the high school, and because she was so active in the community, one of the assistant priests who decided that it was time to expose this priest came to her and asked her to be on a committee that would approach the bishops. And so she agreed to do that. And as she learned about all the things that are going on, and they began to put pressure on the priest, she began to lose her friends. If you read the book, the headings on each one of the chapters is a quote from the Sunday bulletin that he wrote himself. And those quotes will tell you more about who this priest was than anything that I could describe. But what it also tells you is that he was the efforts that these people were making to get rid of him. And he had built this school into such a sports powerhouse that the people absolutely loved him. They wouldn't believe a word of any of this negative information about him. And so good friends of hers, just dropped her as a friend. And they actually got to the point where they couldn't stand living in the community anymore. And he sold his farm, which was a significant sized farm, and moved his entire operation to South Dakota and started afresh down there. So they were basically run out of the community because they had been working to get rid of this priest.
Right. So, Charles, I have a question for you on the broader scale. What steps do you think organizations can truly put into place to protect themselves or even handling narcissistic type leadership in these institutions?
Well, that's a good question. I haven't been involved in a lot of these activities in recent times. I spent so much time in volunteering when I was younger that I've decided I pretty much did my duty, taking a break. But if you belong to an organization that has a board, and I would encourage you to become a member of that board. And when you are evaluating people to work in that organization, that you develop a questionnaire that will help determine, what their attitude is about, moral the moral strictures. Okay. And, that would be one thing. I'm not sure right off the top of my head whether that would be immediately effective or how long it would take to develop some kind of a tool like that to really be able to get at the essence of the issues and make sure that you can effectively find the people that would be bad actors. I don't know if you could do that. That would be difficult, I think. But it's certainly something that should be in the mix as far as recruitment into organizations. But how do you know the secrets that are hidden behind the curtain? You just don't until they start to act out. And of course, if you're an organization that finds out that your people are a person or people are acting out that way, obviously you need to have policies that enable you to get rid of them. So
right. I want to just jump in a little bit to something you talk about, and that's blind faith. One of the things that when we met in our pre-interview meeting, you shared a lot about something that would apply to not just religious institutions. Of course, I feel personally mostly religious institutions, but generally speaking, we look at influencers and anyone who I would say is in some sort of a position of authority. And we kind of as humans put this blind faith in there. How can we replace blind faith with a more critical and healthy approach to organizational loyalty? Because obviously, I believe that's one of the things why someone would say, you're lying. There's no way Father Alisa did that. There's no way, because of that blind faith and that loyalty. How can we truly replace that with a more healthy type of approach and still be loyal to the organizations we serve in and the leaders we serve with?
Well, when it comes to religion, blind faith comes into play mostly with those who represent the institution of religion. It would be nice if the masses could have blind faith in God. But
that's so true.
That's much more difficult than having blind faith in the institution. In fact, I think one of the difficulties in religion is the inability of people to master a relationship with God independent of an institution that gives them the guidance.
I agree.
And so the blind faith in a priest, as an example, is something that kind of becomes a substitute for really understanding what God is, who God is, his direction to his people to love each other as he has loved us. Is that so difficult to learn to accept the circumstances of life as part of God's plan, and to deal with them in a way that moves you closer to God rather than questioning God? These are all the personal side of faith. Whereas if you don't have that structure that allows you to do that, you depend on instruction from the priest or the pastor. And if you begin to believe blindly in what they tell you, then you've elevated them to a godlike place, which enables them to be anybody they want. I mean, most of them are worthy of, that kind of respect, but some aren't. And it's the ones that aren't that take advantage of people's blind faith where the problem lies. And so, I think it's just an overall kind of message that every religion should give to its community, that there should not be blind faith in the institution, but that they should try to learn and create a personal relationship with God,
Right.
which is the essence of all religion and of all faith.
Yes. I love it. Well said. Well said. I can't emphasize more. The importance of what you said is having a relationship with God and the Creator that is a relationship with God, the Creator. And then understanding that a religious institution or a religious leader is just an accessory to that relationship that you've already established. And so I hope our viewers and listeners are catching that, because that's so important. It'll be one of the major ways that now, when you have a direct relationship with the source of everything, the one who created, the one who enabled us to even have a church or a church leader, a priest or whatever, then we understand that we don't trust them to be perfect. And if they're not, it's okay. It's just that what they do, how it affects us, we still have to filter out and remove or retain them, or even sometimes re-engage them. But it's like, when I think of the blind faith, it's if you are sure of who you are and you know what you believe and who you believe in, then what another person does will not be trusted without it being tested, right?
Sure.
So faith, it's one thing, and you said it's so easy for us humans to trust another humans. That's because we're living by our sight and our senses, right? And even in the Bible, it says, we walk by faith, not by sight, and that, we keep our eyes fixed on God, right? And so when you do that, then it's through those lenses you get to see individuals and institutions. And then you're able to decipher, this is just not right. And so you take a stand. And so the question I'm going to throw at you here with that is, how are you perceived for even writing this book? Because obviously you have done some things to create privacy and ambiguity in the process of publishing this material, but there's still so much. How are you perceived by your community?
Well, I think the best way to determine that is to look at the reviews. They're all just complimentary as can be.
Right.
But here's what the situation was.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the people who read this book were, well, I shouldn't say most of the people, initially at least, were people who had lived it, who had grown up in that community, who had gone to that school. And they absolutely loved that book.
Mm-hmm.
And there were some of the older people in the community that were still loyal, had blind faith in the priesthood, who were really upset. And some of the people who were closest to him when he was there were the most upset about me writing this book. But that was a very small number, because even those who loved the priest and thought he was God himself, began to realize over time, right, with all the chaos that was going on in the community as he was being removed, that there was something to the stories. Yeah. And so, but yeah, it was universally praised by most of the kids that had grown up in that community and gone to that school. It was a boarding school too, by the way. So this included people that were not from the community. They were from all areas, surrounding areas as well. Other states, Montana. This was a North Dakota story, but people in Minnesota, South Dakota, Montana, all had representation in that school. And so this story was spread throughout that whole area initially.
Right.
And yeah.
Wow. So before we go to wrap up the episode, I want to ask you, what qualities do you believe are essential for cultivating healthy leaders in the future, given all that you've uncovered in this story, real life story in your book? What qualities do you believe are just essential for us to have healthy leadership in the future?
Well, you have to have, I'm going to say competence, and that's probably the wrong place to start. But well-educated competence. It dictates how we find these people. But then once we find those that are competent, we need to check their level of honesty. Okay. We have to determine whether or not they're willing to communicate negative issues. And we also need to determine whether they are able to discuss these issues, even though they might feel victimized. And so it's really great communicators can become great leaders as long as they are honest and straightforward with the issues.
True.
And of course, it doesn't hurt for them to have a great moral education. And so I love private schools, Christian schools, Catholic schools, because they get a daily measure of morality. And I think that is so important. Now, in the old days, we were afraid of sin because we would be condemned. That's not so much a part of the equation anymore, but we need to teach people to be able to open up to God, because you will get the guidance you need without the fear of retaliation for sin.
I agree.
I don't know. That's my idea of a great
Great way
public servant.
I agree. I like it. So we're going to be right back after a word from our sponsors, and we will have Mindset Bites to go with Mr. Charles Utter. Disruptors, and we're back. We had a wonderful, enlightening conversation with our dear guest here, Mr. Charles Utter, on the topic of leadership from a perspective that many of us never think about. And the topic today is exposing the dark side of leadership: lessons learned from a Roman collar crime, written by our dear guest, Charles Utter. And so we want to share a brief bit about his book here in the segment. For those who are watching on YouTube, you get to see a little bit more theatrics, but the ones listening, you'll learn more about the book. And here in a bit, Charles is going to tell us how to get your copy and dive into the story and make your own conclusions, and also be enlightened on your journey of establishing trust in a healthy way with leadership, and Charles would say specifically in religious institutions. So just hang back as we show you a sizzle reel of Charles's book.
In a world where trust and faith are shattered, one book reveals the chilling secrets hidden behind the Roman collar. Roman collar crime violated: the transgressions of a small-town priest. Uncover the horrifying truth of a priest who used his power to exploit innocent souls. Follow the brave survivors as they seek justice in the face of darkness. But amidst the shadows, a sports empire thrives, creating a facade of righteousness. Meet Father Joe Brennan, a man of contradictions. As secrets unravel and tensions mount, one question remains. Can the truth prevail? Witness the unforgettable moments that will leave you breathless. Are you ready to face the darkness that hides beneath the collar? Roman collar crime violated: the transgressions of a small-town priest. Available now. Get your copy and discover the shocking story.
And there you go, ladies and
you
gentlemen.
forever.
That is the sizzle reel to the book. So exciting. If you're interested in unlocking and then following along on the story and the journey and the outcomes, we're not going to give you any spoilers here in the episode. But however, today I get to give the microphone to you, Charles, to give a 90 to 120 second what you want the viewers and listeners to know and learn about you, the book, and what you want them to take away from the lessons you've learned on the journey to not only as a person who would have gone through the experience and lived through it, but overcame it and found your way back again. What kind of mindset did that take for you? And where would you like to encourage our viewers and listeners to go next? Charles, the microphone is yours.
Well, I don't think I have anything all that fantastic to talk about, but, I was just a small town kid, grew up in a situation that was maybe not unique, but it was really impactful. And I think what that did to me was initially kind of give me a kind of a no-care attitude. I went off to college as I graduated from that high school, and I decided I was there to have fun, even though it was a private school. It was, and my parents were paying, and it was expensive, even in those days. And just got good enough grades to get by, and then got out of college, and I got lucky and got a job with a former teacher of mine who remembered me from high school, and that's where things kind of changed, because the reason I went into teaching was I wanted to make sure that I could influence as many kids as possible and treat them in a way and avoid treating them in ways that I had been treated. And that meant instead of being negative, I would build them up, and I would take into account their failings, but build them up and encourage them that they could work on those failings and become better people. Then when I got out of college, as I had mentioned earlier, I was faced with having to make it on my own in business. And I took a similar attitude into the community, because, in one sense, it was a little bit selfish, because I moved into a community that nobody knew me. And so my way of getting known was to get involved in the community, get to know people so that they would do business with me. But that had a positive effect as well, because I ended up being instrumental in doing a lot of good in the community. As I mentioned, I had created the foundation. It's still going. They're still raising money. It's still influential in the community. And that thing started in 1990. So it's a permanent institution that wouldn't be there if I hadn't done it. I got involved on community boards and commissions. I ran for city council, all with the idea of making my community a better place to live. I started a foundation for my parish and worked hard to get it off the ground. And then I became a member of the school board, the Catholic school board, and the parish council, and other boards and commissions in the community, and all with the idea that what needed to be done was action that would improve the community and give it a better opportunity to thrive. And so that's really what I would say to those out there who are interested. That is, be active, take your time, make your community a better place, make your church a better place. And as you do that, you begin to get grounded in that community and become appreciated in that community, and all good things come from that. So that would be my primary recommendation for anybody who's watching.
Thank you so much, Charles. Thank you so much for that. That's very positive. So I want to ask you, Charles, how do we connect with you, and how do we get a copy of your book?
Well, the book is available on Amazon and on what's the other one?
Barnes and Noble, I think.
Barnes, thank you, and Barnes and Noble, but both online.
Yeah.
Now, I have been guilty of not promoting the book as much as I probably should have, and so it's not in many libraries, although there is one library that buys books periodically, happens to be located in Bismarck, North Dakota, but primarily you can get the book by going to Amazon. And I do want to mention this, though. If anybody would like to read this book, have their book club read this book, I've put my email address in the chat box. Let me know, and I will make sure that you can get a supply of books at a discount.
Yes. We will have his contact information wherever you're watching this. It's there.
Right.
Yeah.
And what I'll do is I will buy the books and mail them in bulk to the leader of the book club.
Awesome. That's a free, wonderful gift that he's giving us the opportunity to receive a discount for a book club for those who are listening around the world. Charles, I've got to say thank you so much for your time, your insights. It's been an enlightenment to hear your story and the lessons that you've shared that so many of us can take from. We encourage you again to check out the links below so you can connect with Charles. Listeners, be sure to check out his book. It's called Roman Color Crime: The Transgressions of a Small Town Priest, and take more in-depth and insights into the journey with him. We are reminding you to go ahead, like, share, and subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening to this. Get the word out as we bring. The more you share, the more you subscribe, the more you rate us, the more we're able to bring these wonderful guests. And if you'd like to also be, there's a link in the description. If you'd like to support our podcast, please go ahead and do that. And let's get ready and remember to how we think is what we speak, what we do, what we become. Remember that your mindset is the key to your success. Thank you so much, Charles. Thank you, listeners and viewers from around the world. And we say we're over and out. See you in the next episode of Mindset Mastery Moments. Thank you.
Thank you much, Alisa. Bye now.